So I am really excited to have you here, Lengwe. Thank you so much for coming onto my podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. I've just been like, I've known your work for maybe 2 years, and I'm just like, one day we're getting there and we're here.
We've actually never worked together. I think the first time we might have seen each other was via Chulu somewhere on the platform. Yeah. No, it's really good to have you here. I've watched your stuff as well, and I really love what you're about, and especially mental health, because obviously, I'm a counselor, psychotherapist. Mental health is my passion, and I know you're passionate about it as well. When I saw something you did on Instagram recently, and I reached out to you saying, oh my God, I need to work with this girl. You were talking about mental health and talking about yourself and stuff like that. So I just really loved that. So really glad to be here working with you. So do you want to tell me a bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Lengwe Bobo, and I'm a talker. I think that's how I would describe myself. Like, I talk about everything and anything, but then on the other side, I'm also an introvert. So it's really fascinating that I talk this much, but I don't really like being in the company of people. So I talk about every cause because I feel like every cause is important, right? And there are not enough people speaking about things. So yeah. I think that's a brief thing about me.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and it's funny, people think you have to be one or the other, an introvert or an extrovert, but you really can be both.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so why are you passionate about mental health?
Okay, so I think my passion stems from myself, right? I was diagnosed with dysthymia. That was in 2019. But prior to that, right, I could see these things. So maybe around 13, 14, I started like really liking Demi Lovato. And if you know, she has bipolar and everything. And so I would relate to a lot of things that she was going through. And I was like, is that me? Do I also have bipolar? But then when I read more on it, I was like, no, I don't. So then I started looking into other things that could maybe tell me what I had. So I actually self-diagnosed in the first place. I told myself I had high functioning depression. And I would try to like talk to my mom about it a bit, just here and there, like, oh, mom. I remember the first time when I was 19 itself, like, I mentioned it to her. I was like, so, when I was younger, I used to go through this stuff. I used the past tense, like, in case it's intense, I don't want you to know it's happening now. So I used the past tense of like, do you know, when I was younger, I used to go through these things. And so she's like, yeah, I just never knew what to do, right? So I was like, okay, I'll communicate better. So what would happen is I would look at different articles, people explaining how they feel, I would send them to her so that she can understand that when I'm doing this or when I'm feeling like this is what's happening, this is what's going on in my head. And so I was just open. I'm just a generally open person. So people would be asking me how I'm feeling and stuff like that. And normally when somebody says, how are you? They just want fine. But I'm the person who'll be like, I'm not okay, but I'm going to be better and stuff like that. So I was like, I think we need to normalize that, right? Because people didn't normalize talking about their feelings in general. And so when I got diagnosed and everything, I was like, let's just talk about it. It's part of life. Mental health is a part of everybody. And so we need to have people knowing what it is, right? And then you also have, like, in Zambia, you have a lot of people who I think are schizophrenic, right? Mm-hmm. They'll be out in the streets, roaming the streets and stuff like that. And every time, from the time I was young, you just hear, that's a mad person. That's how it was talked about. Mm-hmm. That's how it's still talked about. And so I was just like, this isn't helpful. Like, as a society, what are we doing about this? Why are these people out here that probably have family and friends, but those family and friends probably don't know how to help them? So I've actually done this outreach. I was working as an NGO, and I did this outreach at Chainama, mm-hmm. Which is like the biggest mental health hospital in Zambia. And they'll just tell us things like, no, people will come and they'll dump their relatives here, never to be seen again or heard from again, and stuff like that. So it's like, people need to know that people don't choose some of these things that happen to them, right? Like, even when I got depressed, I would have a lot of friends, family. I get like it came from a good place, but it wasn't helpful. They'll tell me things like, just stop being sad. Just get up and tell yourself you're fine. And I'm just like, I think I tried that. So that's how I got into the mental health space. That's how I started talking about it. That's how I started working with organizations that deal with it. Okay. I just want people who feel like me to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing for people to know that they're not alone. There's a few things that you said when you were talking that I kind of picked up on. I know you talk about how open you are about mental health and how you talk about things, but there's also an element, I think, of everyone that isn't so open, and there's a reason why sometimes we hide certain things. You mentioned your mum. You said you spoke to your mum in the past tense, like I used to go through this, and not that I go through this. Why? And you said you didn't want. What was the word you used? You didn't want the intensity.
I didn't want it to be too intense. Yeah.
So why? There's obviously a fear there of when relating to someone else with mental health. So regardless of how open you may be, there was still some kind of a block. What made you talk to her in the past tense? What was the barrier there?
I think my mom is like generally open, but it's just like, what if she didn't believe me, right? Like, because historically, like from a really young age, I was all over with my emotions, right? I'd be really happy one moment and really sad the next moment. And so I grew up with cousins, with friends who would just say like, Lengwe is emotional, right? And so when I would have like episodes of depression, I would end up really like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to be on my own, right? Like more than usual. I just want to be in a whole curtains closed, dark room, lonely music, stuff like that. And so I think that started affecting her because she is an introvert, but what I was doing wasn't normal to her. You get, like, it wasn't something that she was used to or accustomed to. So when I went to talk to her, I'm just like, what if she doesn't understand me, right? What if she says something hurtful and it affects me? I would be able to lock it up with that was in the past, right? And I'll just be able to move forward because I'm clearly not getting any help from her and everything like that. But the moment she said she understood it, she understood it but didn't know how to help. I actually felt a bit broken because I think at that moment I just wanted her, when I was like 14, 15 and going through this stuff, I just wanted her to be able to say like, I see you, I see that you're sad, how can I help? Right? And those things never happened. So, and my mom's a single mom. So I also just didn't want her to feel guilty. Like, she's going through this stuff now. She's talking to me about this stuff now. And I didn't have the time for her. So yeah, so I was trying to like make sure she's fine. I was trying to make sure I'm fine. I was afraid of like, what if she thinks I'm lying? What if she thinks like everybody else that I just want attention? So yeah, I was just like trying to protect.
So there's a lot going on there. You're protecting you, you're protecting your mom, you're protecting her situation and everything else. And I guess, you know, you're remembering that child that you were, that just needed that comfort and never got. That's very interesting. And also like with that just proves that people like you, like advocates for this type of thing, are necessary. People like us, I should say, because everyone wants that person to just understand and listen and get them and say, I hear you, I see you, I've got you. That's why the work that we do is very important. Can you remind me what's your diagnosis?
Dysthymia.
Okay, what does that do? You know, just briefly.
So dysthymia is chronic mild depression, right? So there's some, what can I call them? Checks that you have to go through to be diagnosed with like major depressive disorder. And I don't fit the entire category, right? I don't have all of them. I just have some of them. And then I've had this probably like since I was 14, I'm now 21. So I have this for this excessive amount of time. So to be diagnosed with that, you'd have had to be going through it for a minimum of 2 years prior to that. And so I meet those standards, and that's how I got my diagnosis.
Okay, I see. So that's a great understanding for those that don't understand what dysthymia is. So you are an advocate. You're an advocate for what? Because I know you do plenty, which is nice, which is a good thing. But let us know, what are you an advocate for? What are your passions?
Okay, so firstly, women's rights, because you know, evidently, and then also the rights of children with special needs, climate change, Pan-Africanism, access to education, and of course, mental health.
Okay, so we've touched upon mental health. Can we talk about women's rights? What is it? Tell me something about women's rights. What have you advocated for? What are you advocating for?
Okay, so right now I'm actually working with an NGO, right? My friend came to me, she's like, Lengwe, you talk about all this stuff to do with mental health. I would like you to be part of my organization. So she's trying to set up an organization that would deal with women who have been in like abusive relationships, women who probably have given up on life because of what they've gone through. She's trying to maybe help them start up businesses, help them just get back into life and stuff like that. So mainly that's what I'm focusing on, but just in general, I will give information, especially to guys. I think a thing that we normally do, or even just generally organizations do, is when they're talking about women's rights, they talk to women about their rights. But it's like, yes, I should know my rights, but this other person who I'm living life with should also know. So I think it's as important to talk to men about these rights as it is to women. So I will have those conversations with my friends. I'll be like, when this is happening to a woman, it's because of this. Like you are in a position of privilege. So use that privilege. I can give you an example. I was on the national robotics team in 2018, and we were going to Mexico. We had a layover for 24 hours in Dubai. And so I was my best friend. And somebody told my best friend, because I wanted to stay in, when we were carrying the robot and everything, we had to pass it through like customs. And that was done like way later when we were already at the hotel. So they called people back. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay here, enjoy the hotel, because y'all ain't getting me back to that airport. I need to explore. And so I did that just in good faith, just having fun. And then I had somebody come, like had told my best friend, because he's a guy. So he had told my best friend, like, tell Lengwe that what she did wasn't cool. We were all going out. I mean, like, I get she's a woman, but she didn't have to be moody. And I was like, but I was just trying to live life, right? And so I would have those conversations, even with my best friend. Like my best friend is the biggest feminist now. Like Mutiama is a bigger feminist than I am. And he's just like, he's just like, yeah, he came back like sometime later and he apologized. Like I never understood it. And he goes like, I now understand that I have to use my privilege to be able to speak to other guys to explain to them that you don't do that to women. Like, they go through enough. We need to help them. We need to be allies and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So why did he think you were being moody?
Just staying. Just the fact that I decided to stay at the hotel. Apparently, it had something to do with me being. So I'm just like, I don't get that. I just want to be at the hotel.
Yeah, and sometimes being alone is nice, or doing something different to everybody else is nice, and you just enjoy that. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're segregating yourself or separating yourself from groups. So it's a good thing he acknowledged that and apologized. Yeah, so I guess with women's rights, so do you more so look at women's rights within a workplace or in education, or just in general?
I think in general. I normally, so with each of these categories, normally I don't like specialize, just because, like I said, I don't think there's enough people talking about any of this stuff. So I look at it from the perspective of homes, right? Within homes, the way males and females are treated. I think it goes down to that, because if you're going to tell a girl that she must be submissive to a guy just because he's a guy, you have a lot of women who are growing up broken by that, who end up in maybe abusive situations and can't leave because they feel like this is what they've been told historically, right? So I go to like the root of it. When for instance, if we're being given tasks at home and the guys like bail out and like, no, guys, I'm like, no, that's not happening with me. You are doing the dishes, I'm going to wash, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and we are sharing everything equally. So I'm just trying to get people's minds that we are equal, right?
Exactly. And I think with
like due to us, what you do to the guys, there shouldn't be any difference.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a lot in African culture as well. I can speak for African culture because that's my culture. It's been a lot of that historically. I think change is coming, but there's a lot more change to come. But where if there's a brother in the household, the sisters are doing the work, the sisters are even picking up after him, and he gets served and he gets the big piece of chicken or whatever it is because he's the boy. Maybe he's older, maybe he's not, but so I think a lot of change needs to come, and I think that's a great place to tackle in the home, because if you're waiting till you're tackling school, tackling education, tackling businesses, that you've missed the foundations of things, the foundations which start at home with everyone. And I think when we tackle people at a young age as well, it's the best time to tackle people. So yeah, okay. So were you going to say something?
I was going to say, like, I think for me, because I was also raised in privilege. Like, my mom has never told me you can't do that just because you're a woman. You should do that because you're a woman. So even when growing up, I was never in that oppressed category. Like, I think women, I never held myself back. There was nothing I couldn't do. I did it all. Everything that you can think of. I just did everything. And I felt like that started because of where I was in the house. And how I was looked at and perceived. So
okay, that's good. And I guess that's why you've got this outlook. You're able to say, okay, I had this, why can every other woman not have it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what about what's your passion about children with special needs?
Okay, so for that one specifically, I have an aunt. Well, she's not my aunt, but in African culture, everybody older than you.
Everyone's your aunt. Your mom's friends, every adult is your auntie. So yeah.
Exactly. So she's like,
besides, I'm older than you, so you can call me auntie.
Okay, Auntie Yuna. So yeah. So my aunt does this work. I don't know how she got into it actually exactly, but she does this work with children who have autism. So a lot of the times she'll come to me for like, how can we help them be more comfortable? How can we get the message out there that that these children have these needs, and everybody needs to be able, as a community, as a society, to be able to cater to them. So we've talked about things like maybe sign language in schools, right? Because I don't know sign language, and I think it's a bit embarrassing, because like, what happens if I meet somebody who can only communicate through that form, right? Like, they might already have this different life experience, and it may already be hard enough. So the least I could do is learn how to communicate with them. Just small things like that. So I would help her, like maybe set up events, maybe marches for children with autism and stuff like that. And so when she's doing it, people would always assume that it's because she's got a child with special needs. And she's just like, no, it's just because these are people too. And we should treat them like people too. And then I also have a friend, acquaintance, who deals with albinism. And so I've just like learned more about their lifestyle. I've also learned about, how we have these beliefs in Africa, like, no, if you cut off the arm of somebody with albinism, it's going to heal this, it's going to heal that. And so I've been seeing a lot of those stories. I haven't really gone into it. Maybe I'll do a collaboration. I haven't really gone into it because I know she's holding it down with her organization. But those are just like some of the things that I'm interested in. I'm also recently, maybe like a week ago, I started looking at cerebral palsy. And I remember that when we were in high school, we had to do like community outreach and stuff like that. We went to this place. I can't remember what it was called, but a lot of the children there had cerebral palsy, and they're just like dumped there because their parents didn't want them. So just like to get those people the care that they need, because the system is overwhelmed. You can't really help people as well as it's supposed to. So so my passion.
And volunteering is a massive thing as well, or just being able to dip in. And what I really like about you is that you don't just stick with one thing, because we don't have to. A lot of times we feel that we need to specialize in order to focus and be good at just one thing. You can have multiple professions, you can have multiple interests and talents, and volunteer in multiple things. And that's what I really like about you, because you're identifying different causes. And I guess whilst identifying that, you're also spreading the word, because you have friends that you might tell them about it and stuff like that. So I think that's such a really good thing. I personally have worked for over 15 years with children, children with special needs, so be it autism or learning difficulties or whatever else. I'm also trained in British Sign Language, and I think what you said is so important, because even if you learn something as basic as the alphabet in British Sign Language, like doing a class or a course or something to teach people just the alphabet is so simple to be able to communicate going forward. So let's say when I first started learning British Sign Language, the first thing I learned was the alphabet. So if I couldn't speak to someone, I would just spell out. So, spell it out with the signing. And if you're able to spell a word, a sentence, then you can say, oh, you're trying to say this. And then communication was starting to flow that way. So I think that's a really good thing. If that's something you're looking into, maybe that's a suggestion or something. So just the alphabet, perfect. So yeah, so no, that's really good.
Thank you so much.
And also, so how do you think all these things relate to mental health, in terms of, like, obviously there's people with special needs, that is, mental health comes into all of that, but how do you think or do you think people are being exposed to how it affects their mental health, or how it affects all of our mental health?
Okay, so I think when it comes to mental health, you have to look at it from the perspective of intersectionality, and that's just the thing, like, one thing leads into the other, right? So a common basic example that I can give is alcoholism, which is like rampant in Zambia. Like when you go to Chinama, maybe 90% of the cases because of alcoholism. And so when you see an alcoholic, you're just there in Zambia, just saying stuff like nichakolwa, right? Mm-hmm. That's a drunkard. But maybe his economic situation led him to where he is, right? Maybe he got depressed because he couldn't afford to take care of his family, who resulted to drinking. And then in resulting to drinking, you can also get alcohol-induced mental illnesses. So there's like this whole cycle that exists. So it's the same thing as children with special needs, right? They communicate differently than we do, depending on what their needs are. But it's hard enough that they have to be viewed differently. Us not being able to understand that, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, one of the things was I wanted my mom to hug me. Mm-hmm. So I wanted her to be around me. So us not being able to understand what they're going through may also make them sad, may also make them depressed, may also contribute to all these mental health issues. So I think that's where it comes in, even with like women's rights, people not maybe getting equal pay for their work, people being passed over based off of their sex or something like that, may also just make them feel like they're not doing enough, that they're not enough, that they're born their own gender. And so, yeah, things like that, just all tie into mental health.
And I said that because I think everything in life is tied to mental health. Our thoughts and our feelings are something we go through. We can't skip a day without going through thoughts and feelings. That's not possible.
Exactly.
So our thoughts and feelings are our mental health, whether it's a positive thought or negative thought, it's mental health. I feel like that's such a perfect, powerful example that you used. And I think alcoholism is a whole nother example, a whole nother topic. I mean, because with alcoholism, the whole chakolwa thing that you said, it's like people associate drinking with social and just wanting to have fun and things like that, but actually they forget about the mental health side of things. When someone is drinking further than just being sociable or having some fun or enjoying the taste of it, it becomes, what's going on. And I've known of people fall into depression, lose their homes, lose their families, lose their children because of this thing that people don't understand. And a lot of times people say it's a choice, you're choosing to drink. Well, no, sometimes you get so caught up in this habit, and it's an illness, it's a disease. So I think that's a whole nother topic to cover, which actually I'm quite interested in covering at some point. So I think absolutely everything is tied to mental health.
I think one thing I wanted to add is just like the definition, right? I think one thing that you pointed out just now is that whether it's a good or a bad feeling, it ties into your mental health. And that's something that people don't understand. So people would normally interchange mental health with mental illness. When mental illness is something different, and mental health has to do with your whole, like your physical health, right? So when you look at the WHO definition of health, it encompasses mental health, because you can't be healthy without being mentally well. And that's something that people don't understand. So health, when I talk about mental health, I always just say, when you're talking about health, right, you're either ill or you're well. That's the same thing for mental health. You're either ill or you're well. So confusing the terms as well is something that happens. And in that, we have people not understanding what the big deal is. Like, I don't have a mental illness, so I'm fine.
But you have mental health.
It's about everything. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So we have mental health, whether it's mental ill health, whether it's mental positive mental health or negative mental health. Mental health is within us. It's with everybody. So yeah, it's very important that people learn that when we talk about mental health, it's not the illness of it or the disease or the sickness. You know, we all have mental health, and it's understanding that. So yeah, that's you put that beautifully. So what else did you say to me? You talked about Pan-Africanism.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yes. And that's so close to my heart. So one thing I noticed when growing up is that people didn't want to be Black. People didn't want to be African. People didn't want to be Zambian. So a lot of the times, maybe we're playing games like we're playing house or playing mommy. And everybody's like, I'm in America, I'm in the UK, it was never, I'm in Zambia, I'm the Lord Zambezi, I'm just, around, right? So I started to see that as a problem, because I'm just like, I love myself, right? There's nothing really changed about myself. Like, I don't dislike, me liking myself doesn't mean I dislike anybody else. I just really like myself. And I think that also contributed to what I'm able to do, right? I can give you an example of when I was like 17 years old, I wrote this article. And I was literally made to take it down just because it was like, no, that can't be something that a 17-year-old says. You can't think at that level and stuff like that. So that element of being too young to do things would come in. But when I looked at myself, I'm just like, you're just putting all these boundaries for me.
Barriers, suppressing you. I mean.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I started saying like a lot of the things that we're going to be able to achieve or not achieve, we're going to come from where we view ourselves, right? Like, what do you see yourself as, or what's the possibility? What possibilities do you have for yourself? So like somebody like Elon Musk, right? I think a lot of the things that when he was just starting off, a lot of things that he wanted to achieve, people were probably like, that can't happen. You can't do that. But he's like within himself, he knew like, I can do something like that. So my journey into Pan-Africanism was kind of like to understand historically, why does it seem like Africans, maybe Zambians specifically, don't like themselves? And then beyond that, what can we do about it? And so for me, that leads into like my other cause, which is education. It all came about how we are taught in schools, right? Whenever you're in school, you have somebody of a different race as your friend, you're seen as more superior than everybody else, right? And you also have this thing with Africans where they don't want to work with each other. It's like, so when one person has a business and another person of a different race has a business, Black people, Africans are rarely going to want to support their fellow Africans. So I was like, like you can see it almost everywhere across the board in the country. So I started trying to find out what this issue is. And I was just like, we really other each other as Africans, right? Like we are all one people. At the end of the day, we've had a lot of injustices happen to us, and we can relate across the board. Like I can relate to somebody in South Africa over maybe what they went through in apartheid, but we went through something else, some other form of segregation as a country, and those effects, like they exist for all of us. So I just started developing this thing of teach children to love themselves, to love their hair, to love their skin, to just love who they've been born as, so that when they go out into the world and they're looking into all these possibilities, they don't stop themselves, right? Like mentally, they don't just be like, okay, this is where I can end. It's just like push the limits because you can, because you're allowed to, because the world is everybody's playground. And exactly. So that's where that came from.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And with you being told, can I just ask what your article was about at 17?
Well, I was calling out the government.
Okay, so you're calling out the government, and that's that's powerful. That is powerful stuff for a 17-year-old. Okay, because mainly, politics can start at any age. You can be interested in whatever, but a lot of the times, especially, I'm talking from when I grew up in Zambia, children were suppressed. I mean, I was raised in a family that was open and all that stuff, and much like yourself, I was privileged. But a lot of times children, you're seen, not heard, and you don't have to get involved in adult conversations. And yeah, of course I had a bit of that. When grown-ups talk, just go and play, or don't say anything, don't get involved. So I understand that completely, and I'm very passionate about children as well, and I think children are our future, and if we're able to teach them from a young age. And when you talk about love yourself, love your hair, like my daughter is mixed race, and bless her, she's only 7 years old, and even years before this, she was talking about, why is my hair different to everybody else? Because most of my family are, well, we're black, and then we've got she's obviously mixed race, so there's the white side of her family, but then she's also seeing in her school where she's in the minority, she's been the only black person in her class for a long time, and in her school, so, or the only mixed race person, I should say. So she would be like, I want my hair to be straight and white like everyone else, as blonde straight hair. But she would say, oh, but when I'm at home, why do I have to use different hair products? Why can't my hair be like your hair? So it's like kind of like understanding. But I've taught her to love herself, to love her hair. I spilled into her when it comes to the curls and the coils and different hairstyles, and she's now like, oh, my hair. She'll stand there and be like, Mom, when I go to this party, oh, my first day at school, can you please get my curls popping? And I'm like, yeah, I've got you, girl. So yeah, I think loving yourself physically, emotionally, mentally is so important from a young age, because when you're older, it's getting a bit too late, because then you're now dealing with the issues that come up, like the mental health side of it.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, it's really powerful. I'm very glad to actually talk to someone who's not just specializing or focusing, because I think mental health is in everything. And if there's anything I can take away from you, is also, whilst we focus on something in particular, it's just important to dip into different things, because we all have a responsibility, you know, in this world to do our piece and to raise awareness.
Yeah, because like the world is so interconnected, and we have the internet and all these other things, but then looking like at Zambia on the ground, right? If you want things to go to like the grassroots, you have to be able to have these conversations in a way that people are going to understand you. So I'm going to have this conversation with my friend. My friend might be able to have it with a house help. Her house help may be able to have it with her children, you know, so we get things going down there. We have so much like information, but we've also reached an age where I think we're becoming complacent, and we don't want to look into what this information is. And so I'm the person who's going to find that information and like, look, you ran away from this, I'm bringing it here, I'm going to talk about it because it's important.
Bringing it to the table. So they say, what do you bring to the table? This question women are always asked. What do you bring to the table? This is what I'm bringing to the table. Let's discuss it.
Exactly, everything. I'm bringing everything.
And what I love about these platforms as well, podcasting and Zoom and YouTube, is that it's an open platform where you're able to say, guys, I did this talk here, have a listen. And I'm able to say, guys, I spoke to this girl, and then it's just raising awareness. And I guess this is how we meet people, and this is how we just get to grow our causes, isn't it? Okay, so what are you doing for your mental health? As we come to a close, what are you doing for your mental health? And what have you taken away from this conversation?
Okay, so what I'm doing for my mental health is pacing myself. I've been on the habit of just like taking everything up. So somebody who told me, can you help me with this outreach? I'm like, yeah. Can you help me with this? Yeah. And I'm a law student, right? And law school can be a lot. So I'll have like my assignments, I'll have this and this and that. I'm like, okay, so on that day, I also need to go out there. And it's only recently that I've been able to kind of say no. Like, no, I'm not available for that. I would have loved to come in, but I'm busy. So I feel like that's prioritizing my mental health, because I used to burn out all the time. I'm actually glad we've reached October and I haven't had a single burnout. Last year, June, I probably burnt out for like a whole month. Wow. I couldn't do anything. I was just barely making it by. So I've learned to give myself space, right? Like, in as much as I want to speak on these issues, in as much as they're important, me being around to speak about them is also important. So if I take on too much, then I'm not going to be able to do this stuff in the future. So I just, I'm learning to have grace in myself. I'm learning that I can't do it all, but I can teach people who might be able to help me do it all. So yeah. And then from this conversation, I've learned that it's important to talk about everything. Because a lot of the time, like you're saying, I have people telling me to specialize and just like, no, just stick to mental health. Just like, don't talk, just mental health. Just mental health. Like that should be your brand, mental health. And I'm like, that's not me. Like, I'm the child who wanted to do law and also wanted to do aerospace engineering, right? These two things on different sides of the court. So I think it's important to talk about these things. I think that it's important to connect with people with different audiences, and just to collaborate. And that's another thing, because historically, I wanted to work on my own, right? I'm a bit more of a loner. But then over time, when I do help people out, or when I do reach out with other people, I'm just like, this is more impactful.
Yeah, and you know what? We're not an island. One person is not an island, and I think being that person that wants to work alone, sometimes it's not doable, and it's better. And for the causes that you do, you need to work with people, because like we said, it's about raising awareness, but also speaking to someone else who's in a position to help, and because you can't do everything alone. And I think just interconnecting, and it's sharing, isn't it? And I guess that's why we're here as well. You can't get this message out alone. You've got different platforms you can go on to get, heard, get yourself understood, and your causes heard. So I think I've taken away the same thing as you. And you know what? I've heard the same things over and over. Specialize. I don't, specializing is not me. I mean, I have said certain areas that I have specialized in, and to be honest, with my profession, I've specialized in different parts. So those different specialities I have can still come together, can still be spread out. So if I decide to dip into this one for a year or for a month, I can. If I decide to dip into this one, but I don't think one person should necessarily specialize for their life per se. Otherwise, I feel like you're limiting yourself. And there's so many causes I'm passionate about, that if I then limit myself to one because I think it will gain me more of an audience, or it will gain me, whether it's just a following or different types of clients, that's not what I'm about. I'm about reaching out to people because life is tough and because life is a certain way. So I've taken away exactly that from you. So thank you for that. Do you have any last words before we go?
I think my last words are on just what we've spoken about, right? Being able to reach out to people. Perspective matters. So at some point, I started being known as the mental health girl, which isn't a problem. But my problem came in, I don't want to be the universal story, because my experience isn't the universal experience, right? So working with other people, and people like reach out to me, and if they can get me, like if they can get to a place where they want to share their stories, I'm also able and capable to do that, because it's no longer just about me. It's about, I don't care who does it, but somebody must, right? So if there's an NGO here and an NGO there, I'm just like, I'm going to tell you both the idea. Somebody must just run with it, because we don't have time for this. So I think that people should also realize that it's important for them to have a voice, but it's also important that they empower other people to have voices too.
Exactly. It goes back to the one person can't do all. And then the more we spread it out, the more we're able to do it. And sometimes one person might do something slightly better or just slightly differently to another person. And knowing your strengths, and this NGO and this NGO might have different strengths, and maybe coming together, the three of you might end up with something great. So that's good. So Lengwe, listen, I mean, I don't even think we've touched upon half of what you're about today, because there's so much to you. You're such a strong, powerful young lady. And, I just think that when you talk, there's so much wealth of experience that comes from somebody so young. And I know sometimes you don't like the whole age thing of you're too young for this, too young for that. And I'm not saying you're too young for anything, but from this young age, you can only grow. You know what I mean? And there's so much to you. There's so much strength and so much power that I think people need to hear more of you. So that said, where can people find you? Gita, let me know about your socials or whatever else.
Okay, so you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. Is that everything? I believe it's everything. At Lengwe Bobo. Just Lengwe Bobo, and you'll find me.
Nice and easy. So I'll put the all your socials down underneath this podcast. And earlier you said something about talking about being able to say no and spending time on with yourself. I did a podcast called Just Say No. It's a nice, short, easy listen. Go and have a look at that. It just reminds us to be able to say no. and take time out, self-care and stuff like that. So I would recommend you go and have a listen to that, Lengwe.
Please. I'm just like, right now, I was like, let me go. Let me go listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. So, yay.